Hi class, my name is Taryn and welcome to Group 3's presentation where myself, Rashmi, and Monica are going to go through our research of Merck's miracle drug Keytruda. So this drug just really has a fascinating story. It's one that continues to lead Merck's portfolio, but if you take a look back at its history, its success certainly wasn't by design, and I think that's what makes these stories so much more rich. So we hope you enjoyed as much as we did. So today the topics we're going to cover are R&D to approval, Merck, intellectual property, regulatory approval, and marketing. So starting with R&D, specifically the mechanism of action of Keytruda, this is an antibody that's a PD-1 inhibitor. And when you're thinking about the normal immune response, T cells, they're responsible for hunting down and destroying cells that have become cancerous. Generally speaking, one of the ways that they do that is through the PD-L1 pathway. And how they do that is the T cell has a PD-1, a programmed death receptor, and they use that to differentiate between healthy human cells and cancerous cells. And how they do that is typically healthy human cells, they express a PD-L1 or PD-L2, which is a programmed cell death ligand on their surface, and that binds to the PD-1 receptor binds to that ligand, and that tells the T cell that that is a healthy human cell, so it won't initiate programmed death. And then if it comes into contact with a tumor cell that doesn't have that, then it knows to initiate programmed death. However, unfortunately, some tumor cells have the ability to express this ligand on their exterior surface, and so they're able to inactivate T cell programmed death. And so what Keytruda does is it binds to the PD-1 receptor on T cells, and then that just initiates programmed death, both for healthy cells and cancerous cells. So it's not like the T cell's not specifically focusing just on cancer cells. It kills pretty much everything it comes into contact with. So when you look back at the startling history and how it was discovered, it's actually a pretty interesting story. So 3 Dutch scientists were working in a company called Organon, but this company was focusing on women's health and neurological diseases. And so they had a PD-1 antibody program as a part of their portfolio, but it was meant to support their core objective of autoimmune disease. So they kind of just stumbled on this PD-1 antagonist, and they started to focus in on developing a humanized version and modifying it, engineering it to be more potent and selective. And so shortly after this discovery in 2007, Organon was acquired by Schering-Plough. And so Schering-Plough took a look at this program compared to the rest of their portfolio and ranked it at pretty much the bottom. And that was mostly because there was nothing in tumor immunology that seemed to work. However, they did receive some encouraging preclinical data, so they thought that they were going to initiate an IND, and they started to pursue that. However, in that phase, Schering-Plough was then acquired by Merck, and Merck then did the same process of looking through the portfolio, and they basically just said, no more work, we don't want to do any more work on this. That was until BMS published a successful phase 3 clinical trial in refractory metastatic myeloma, and that was involving a drug that's similar to Keytruda, which is what they had in their arsenal. So they quickly reactivated the IND, but they had a lot of ground to cover. So Merck was pretty concerned at this point because they had a really promising candidate, but BMS was in phase 3. They were so much further along. So when their IND was approved by the FDA so that they could start their phase 1 trial, in their phase 1 trial, they focused on dose escalation and tolerability, but they went for a range of advanced cancers. And so in that initial readout, they saw that there was a strong potential in melanoma patients. So they started to expand their cohort to just focus in on melanoma patients. And then they got around, I think, 700 patients, and it became the largest phase 1 ever done in oncology. And luckily, they were also awarded breakthrough designation, which was a new program it started in 2012. And through that process, they were able to get approved by October 2nd of 2015. And since then, they've just embarked on this journey to try to find other cancers that could be combated by Keytruda. And since then, they've had 10 additional indications approved. So now I'm going to hand it off to Monica to talk about Merck's organization and their strategy.
Merck is the 5th largest pharmaceutical company globally based on sales. Merck had projected in 2016 that by 2022, they would achieve $38.5 billion in sales, and that they would reach $7.4 billion in R&D expenses. Well, Merck has surpassed their own projection, and they are overachieving their plan. When we look at Merck's businesses, it's divided into 3 areas: animal health, pharmaceuticals, and vaccines. Keytruda falls underneath pharmaceuticals, as you can see, via oncology. Keytruda accounts for 17% of Merck's overall revenue as of 2018. Merck's competition is vast. The pharmaceutical industry has over 200 companies, and Keytruda's key rivals to date is Opdivo and traditional chemotherapy. When we look at Keytruda's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, there are many, but there are three that I will focus in on. The first being a strength of Keytruda's, which is the fact that the drug has truly addressed many illnesses. Another strength is Keytruda's patent strategy. First launching the drug as an orphan drug, they've added new formulary, they have a license agreement, and they're well on track to evergreen this drug. Opportunities for Keytruda is that they need to focus to continue to research to see if the drug can address any other forms of cancers and any other illnesses. When we look at Keytruda's patent history, it is interesting, and there are some litigations. But first, Keytruda's original patent with additional extensions is set to expire in 2035. When we look at who invented Keytruda, it was invented by three scientists that were at a Dutch pharmaceutical company called Oregon, which was purchased by Schilling-Plough and in turn acquired by Merck. Also, Merck announced in January 2017 that they would settle a litigation on possible patent infringements with Bristol Myers Squibb, an Ion pharmaceutical company, that will require them to pay $625 million upfront with royalties of 6.5%. In addition to those things, as of April 1st of 2019, Merck has received approval to use Keytruda in China, which is a huge step in their global deployment of the drug. With regards to Keytruda's patent strategy, as I mentioned earlier, it started off and was launched as an orphan drug. There's been new formulary just about every year with regards to the drug. They have a license agreement due to their litigations, and the drug is well on track to become an evergreen drug. However, with this expanded time frame of their patent, this does impact overall healthcare expenditures because biosimilars and generic drugs will not come on to the market as quickly as anticipated. And this means that potential patient access may be limited, continue to be limited due to the overall pricing of this particular drug, which we will talk about later in this presentation. When we look at the clinical trial process that Keytruda was under, it was very thorough for the current known uses of the drug. The key call out is really linked to the subjects. Keytruda, the team for Keytruda was very mindful about the warnings and precautions of the drug, and they made a decision to limit a segment of the population from the clinical trials. This segment of the population that was excluded was individuals that had hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HIV, and also individuals with autoimmune diseases. Unlike their rival Opdivo, who did not have this exclusion but have very similar warnings and precautions. We feel that this is a gap in terms of the clinical trials, and that Keytruda, with regards to their clinical trials, was very thoughtful and mindful to keep these people's current health at the forefront of the decision making of the use of drugs, not to risk their health. Merck has also partnered with other companies such as Advexis to conduct clinical trials for Keytruda in addressing prostate cancer. I will now turn it over to Rashmi to review pricing.
Thank you, Monica. This chart here describes efficacy of Keytruda and Opdivo versus standard of care. When compared to standard of care, Keytruda and Opdivo are both superior. But when we compare them to each other, Keytruda has much higher efficacy than Opdivo for the same conditions. Keytruda's overall survival rate at 1 year for non-squamous cell, non-small cell lung cancer is 69% versus that of Opdivo is 51%. And for metastatic non-small cell lung cancer, it's 52% for Keytruda versus the 42% for Opdivo. Keytruda is also preferred first-line treatment for non-small cell lung cancer in combination with chemotherapy. This slide shows all the indications that Keytruda and Opdivo are approved for by the FDA. The indications are almost the same, and so are their side effects. Both of these drugs have similar mechanism of action and thus very similar side effects. The more serious ones are the immune-mediated side effects that can affect vital organs, and in some cases that can lead to death. Fortunately, these are extremely rare. Keytruda differentiates itself from its competitors by being highly efficacious, cost-effective, and it has been approved by the FDA for 11 indications. Of course, on the negative side, it has severe immune-mediated side effects, and it's not been tested on patients under 2 years and is not safe in pregnancy and lactation. The price of Opdivo and Keytruda are the same. Thus, Merck is putting out a superior product at a price that is comparable to its competitors. Opdivo had much higher sales revenue than Keytruda in 2015 and 16, but Keytruda caught up and surpassed Opdivo's revenue by 2018. The sales revenue for both Keytruda and Opdivo are expected to rise in 2019, but Keytruda sales are going to be higher by about $2 billion US. Now let's talk about reimbursements for Keytruda. As you can see from this chart, Keytruda is not covered by most commercial as well as state Medicaid insurances. 55% of Medicare covers Keytruda but requires prior authorization, and only about 8% of the insurances have Keytruda as a preferred first-line treatment. It can be found as a Tier 2 to a Tier 5 drug. Insurances also require FDA-approved testing for PD-L1 biomarker before Keytruda can be prescribed. This puts a lot of restriction on the way physicians would be able to prescribe Keytruda to their patients. In a non-small cell lung cancer study, Keytruda cost about $97,000 per quality gain and about $78,000 per life year gain. This is cost effective when we consider $100,000 as the willingness to pay. Opdivo and Tecentriq did not prove to be cost effective as Keytruda, but looking at it from the patient's perspective, the cost of 50 milligram vial of Keytruda is $150,000 for a full course of treatment and $12,500 per month in the US. Even if the patient meets the requirement for Medicare, he or she would be charged about $30,000 in co-payments, and all this for only a few months of extra life. Keytruda alone could cost the US healthcare system about $1 billion per year. Merck, of course, has a payment assistance program. Merck may be able to provide free Keytruda to people who do not have insurance or whose insurance does not cover the drug. Patients at or under 700% of poverty line get about $25,000 in subsidy per year, and patients above 700% of the poverty line get $10,000. Patients would have to pay $25 in copay per administration of the drug, and this program also doesn't cover people under Medicaid. Keytruda is on the NICE formulary list, and NHS reimburses the cost of the treatment. In Australia, patients who are eligible for the PBS scheme pay $39 per dose of Keytruda, but if they do not qualify for the scheme, they pay about 150,000 Australian dollars. The French authorities have negotiated a real low price for Keytruda at about 6,000 euros per year. From these comparisons of cost around the world, US spends a lot more for the same drug than other countries in the world. Now I'll hand it over to Taryn to go over marketing.
Merck's initial marketing strategy of Keytruda focused on targeting doctors through professional journal ads, and they reported sales of $919 million in the first 9 months of 2016. This didn't come close to their competitors, who reported sales of $2.4 billion for that same period. What was basically different was the marketing strategy BMS was adopting was direct-to-consumer campaigns, and they were achieving great success. In response, Merck used the same strategy in 2017, and as you can see, they matched their competitors in sales by 2018. Merck's direct-to-consumer marketing strategy was to have their advertisements focus on real people and showing real relationships. So they emphasized a positive impact on the survival of when using the drug. They also looked at the quality of life. So with that 1 year gain, what could you achieve? And that really identified with a lot of patients going through some of these things. They also used catchy phrases like "it is true," and that helped patients remember the name of the drug so that they could talk to physicians. So when you look at the characteristics of these campaigns and then you take a look at the efficacy of the drug, it's no surprise that Keytruda sales rose and surpassed that of BMS.